Not every argument is valid. Not every position is reasonable. Not every proposition deserves to be debated. Why do I have to spell this out? Here are 5 unstable things about the balance fallacy. Number 1, it polarizes discourse. The balance fallacy is what we call it when two sides of an argument are treated as having equal value regardless of context or merit. It's also sometimes called the appeal to moderation, which can be ironic given the fact that often people who are making the appeal are anything but a moderating influence on the discourse. Let's imagine a hypothetical confrontation between, a group of organized white supremacists carrying Nazi flags and a group of anti-racist counter-protesters, just to pluck a totally random example out of thin air. During a discussion about this confrontation, some people side with the counter-protesters, some people side with the Nazis, they're off the Christmas card list, but some people come down in the middle, and these folks in the middle, they say things like, "Oh, certainly we don't support the Nazis. Those guys are just the worst. But let's not forget about some of those protesters. They were pretty aggressive. And the Nazis did have a permit to be there after all. Did the protesters have a permit?" Now, instead of an argument with only one reasonable side, and that would be the non-Nazi side, in case I need to mention it, the folks in the middle are creating the illusion that both sides are equivalents of one another. Yeah, sure, the Nazis do some bad things, the protesters do some bad things. Let's just try to remain unbiased here and be reasonable about this, shall we? This sort of argumentation not only polarizes the discourse, number 2, it legitimizes extremism. Yeah, those Nazis who were obviously contemptible fascists a moment ago, now they're just some people who disagree about stuff with some other people. They're not an inherently violent threat to liberty and democracy, they just have a different point of view. Hey, I wonder why they believe the things they believe. I heard they don't even think of themselves as Nazis. Maybe they have good reasons for holding a rabidly ethnocentric worldview. Let's ask them. Now, instead of arguing over how to stop Nazis, we're arguing over whether or not Nazis might have a point sometimes. Good thing this is just a hypothetical example, huh? Number 3, it enables appeals to a false middle. Once the false impression of two equivalent extremes has been established, it's much easier for people to believe that the most reasonable position lies somewhere between those two extremes. Now, here's the tricky part. In circumstances where the balance fallacy isn't in play, sometimes that's true. In fact, often that's true. Every one of us has had to compromise now and then. Compromise is a good and necessary component of politics, of our relationships with friends and family, of our interactions with coworkers. But there are times when treating the two sides of a disagreement as equally bad and camping out in the middle is the worst thing you could possibly do. To return to our 100% hypothetical example, what is the middle ground between supporting Nazis and protesting Nazis? Not supporting Nazis, but not protesting them either? Sounds like the Nazis get the better end of that. One more person who isn't standing in their way. See, sometimes you have no choice but to take a side, whether you want to or not. Silence or inaction in the face of intolerance effectively enables that intolerance. You may feel more comfortable in the middle, but there are circumstances where that middle doesn't actually exist. And pretending it does? Well, number 4, it justifies apathy. Here's the attractive thing about the balance fallacy. Life in the false middle is easy. You get to pretend that you're above it all, on the moral high ground. You're not biased. Your logic hasn't been clouded by appeals to your emotions or morality. You haven't been seduced by one side or the other, drawn into this messy, partisan bickering like the rest of these poor schmucks. You're one of the reasonable ones. You're out of the fray, watching from the sidelines, able to point out the virtues and faults of both sides. If you feel like it, you don't have to. In other words, you can choose to do nothing. Are cops murdering black folks in alarming numbers? Some of those protesters at the Black Lives Matter rally were chanting some pretty rude slogans, though, so I can't really take a side. I'd better just do nothing. Women make less money, have their bodily autonomy constantly threatened, and are frequently targets of sexual harassment and assault. But hey, some of those feminists are kinda extreme too. I think I'll just do nothing. Nazis, mobilizing in larger numbers than they have in decades, are marching in the streets, running people over with cars, beating people with poles. Sure, that's terrible, but what about those protesters who pulled down that statue? They didn't have a permit to do that. I can't stand with people who would resort to vandalism. Goodness gracious. I'll just do nothing. You get the point yet? Number 5, it obstructs moral clarity. Compromise is good. Moderation is good. Sometimes two sides of an argument are extremes, and the most reasonable position does lie somewhere between those extremes. But sometimes, and folks, this is one of those times, the only morally acceptable thing to do is to choose a side. Yeah, see, the twist is that my hypothetical example wasn't hypothetical at all. It's actually happening right now in the United States of America. Sorry I tricked you. I hope I didn't betray your trust. And when one side is full of Nazis, carrying Nazi flags, chanting Nazi slogans, beating and murdering people, and the other side is full of people determined to stop those Nazis from advancing one more inch. If you care at all about justice or equality, if you want to have any hope for a future for this country that is peaceful and tolerant and free, then you don't belong in the middle, professing opposition to the Nazis, but wagging your finger at the counter-protesters putting themselves in harm's way as well, because sometimes they go too far too, and those Nazis have a right to peaceably assemble after all. There is no balance between Nazis and people who want to stop Nazis. You're either on one side or the other. So get off the fence and pick one. And if unqualified, unequivocal condemnation of Nazis is not something you're willing to do, don't worry about it. You've chosen a side already. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time. Hey folks, hope you found that one worthwhile. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.